Welcome to the Simple Handmade Everyday Podcast. I'm Kristen, and this is where I like to talk about living a creative, intentional life. I like to chat about quilting, sometimes knitting, what I'm reading and watching, and a little bit about keeping a cozy, organized home. I've got my cup of tea in hand, so let's settle in for a chat. This is episode 68. Hello, friends. Oh my goodness, it is good to be back. It's been a few weeks since my last podcast, and I sort of unintentionally took a bit of a podcast break only because life is full right now. And it was just a little bit hard to carve out the time that it takes to record and get this posted, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. Before we get too far, I want to talk about my cup of tea because I'm super excited about it. I am drinking Mindful Morning Black Tea from Plum Deluxe, and my daughter, Chloe, is also a very big tea drinker, and she had a birthday at the end of March, and as I was, trying to figure out what to get her, which is not hard, we like a lot of the same things, I decided to get her a Plum Deluxe tea subscription. So every month she will get a new thing of tea, which comes in just a nice little plastic Ziploc bag. I can't tell there's a measurement on it, but so in addition to the one monthly tea, I pumped up her first box with 3 extra teas, and they are so good. They are so good. So what I'm drinking right now is the Mindful Morning Black Tea. It says, a fresh take on Earl Grey, pairs well with quiet moments and good conversation. I love these descriptions. So it's organic. It's got black tea, orange peels, blue coneflowers, bergamot oil, vanilla essence, love, and gratitude. So anyways, I'm loving it. So I'll put a link in the show notes. I am an affiliate for them, I think. But I do. I really love them. And they just do a really nice job of blending teas without them being too flavory. And I'm looking at this tea. It's in a clear bag, and you can see, what is it, blue cornflower? You see these little purple leaves in there. It's an absolutely beautiful looking tea. So anyway, so that's my tea. Loving that. The other thing I want to say is I just want to take a moment to say thank you to all of you. I just was informed by Podbean, where I host the podcast, that I hit 100,000 downloads. And I know there are podcasts out there that get 100,000 downloads per episode. But you know what? I am grateful for every single one of those. So thank you. That was felt like a kind of a big milestone. So what has been going on around here? So many things. As I was setting up to record here, I was reminded that at my last podcast, I mentioned, I looked over to the little cat tree beside the desk here and said that I had this cat Tiger, and he was sleeping right there, and he wasn't doing well. And in fact, we had to put him to sleep the very next day. And oh my goodness, we had him for almost 16 years, and it was very, very hard. My daughter Chloe was there. We got to hold him while it all happened and everything, and everybody got to say goodbye. But that is the thing about getting pets, is the time that you have to say goodbye, So anyways, so that was kind of a big deal over here. And then the day after that is when I went in for the big hair chop, which I also talked about in my last podcast. But if you're new here, during COVID, I decided to let my hair go gray as opposed to the golden blonde, which was fairly close to my natural color, which was actually my natural color the last time I checked was, a dark blonde. So the golden blonde was a little lighter than it was in real life, but not anymore. So I went in. I fully asked my hairdresser to cut off everything that was blonde. Because I just, because it's gray/white versus the blonde, there wasn't the same kind of demarcation line as if you're, say, a brunette. But still, I wasn't liking it. And I was using that, what's it called? It's called conditioner, silver, like it was a color depositing conditioner to tone down the blonde. But I was just ready to be done with that. And she said, nope. Not going to do that because you will be so unhappy with your hair that short. So she cut it, to me, quite short, actually. I just really wasn't being realistic about where my grow out was. So she cut it so that I still have maybe 2 inches of the old colored blonde. And then she took, so the front of my hair is completely white, and so she took just bleach. So I guess at this point I should pause and say, I want to embrace the gray, but that doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, I will never color my hair. I'm perfectly willing to highlight, for instance, the gray to make it less drab and mousy, which it kind of is in the back. In the front, it's like just straight up white, which I kind of love. So she just took bleach, just white, and she just did what she called a baby weave throughout my hair, which is a weave that takes like maybe half the amount of hair, so just very small amounts. And that just really brightened up the gray in the background. And I think it was a full weave, but so I think from now on I can just kind of do the top layer at some point. Like, it's been a month since I've had it cut, and I'm looking, and you see no evidence of any sort of grow out at all. So if I could just do it, twice a year or something to brighten it up a little bit, I would be perfectly fine with that. And then for the ends where it was still blonde, she just kind of painted, in a way, the bleach over that. You can tell I'm not a hairdresser, which just really lightened them and toned down that yellow. But and I really love it. I put a before and after in the Facebook group, and she blew it out really straight. And when I went in, it was like kind of like a 3-day curly. So my hair was not in the best shape, and I'm wearing a mask in the before. But so it's not a fair comparison, but she blew it out really straight, and it looked really good. It was really a lot flatter than I'm used to. And as a matter of fact, when I came home, my husband was more, I don't know what's the word, more surprised about how it was styled than how it was cut, and how white it was, which I thought was really funny. I'm like, it's not. It's just blow dry. That's not what we're talking about here. But I'm loving it. I'm loving it. The funny thing is because, I don't know, maybe because the front is white and I've always been blonde, or because the ends have a tiny bit of kind of a blonde on them, people just keep saying to me, wow, your hair looks really blonde. Like, I went to the dentist, and I know the woman who is the receptionist at the dentist for 10 years, and she goes, oh, you look really good as a blonde. And I was like thinking, what color did you think I was all these other years? And so I said to her, I've known her for a long time, so I'm just like, well, that's very kind of you to call it blonde, but it's really white. And she said, oh no, I think it just looks blonde. So anyway, so it's been a very seamless transition. It's still a little shorter than I'm used to, but I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it both as a curly, letting it go curly for the first couple days, and then when that curl starts to not look so good, I just pretend it's a body wave and hit it with a curling iron, and I can milk a few more days out of it like that. So I'm kind of enjoying it both in a kind of straight and styled way and a messy curly way. So that's been fun. And the other part of life that's just, been a little encompassing these days is I've got a college senior. My third kid is a college senior, and he's the baby of the family, the 6'4" baby of the family. And, all the college decisions came down. And so we did, over a week, we did 3 days of visits to college campuses. We did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 campuses. And we did them all completely wearing masks, outdoors, completely distant, so completely safe. It turns out later, I think most of these places didn't really want you on campus, but I'm glad. I don't think you can really make a great decision unless you get on campus. So that was actually really fun. We actually drove all the way up to UC Santa Cruz, which I'd never seen, and it is absolutely one of the coolest college campuses I have ever been on. It is in the redwoods, but also has ocean views, and it's a beach town, and each of the set little groups of buildings are just nestled into the mountains, and there's pedestrian bridges that take you over canyons where you can see redwoods. I mean, it was just so cool. Ultimately, he chose UC San Diego. So for those of you keeping score, that is 3 for 3 kids going to UC San Diego. It makes a ton of sense for him. His major is bioinformatics, and apparently that is where bioinformatics was born as a major, and maybe as a field. I'm not really sure. So yeah, so that was kind of, an excruciating month of, this year, because of COVID and all that, and colleges not looking at SATs and ACTs and all that kind of stuff. It was a weird year for college admissions. And so I'm just ultimately glad that he got into the school he wanted, and that those decisions are over. I've also been pushing off because of COVID and other reasons, senior photos. We do the senior photo with the tux, like in the summer right before your senior year. But I never really like those photos. I want photos that look like my kids. And so we have this photographer who used to be at the studio that we liked, but now just does it as a side gig. And all three kids we made appointments with her for these kind of fun photo shoots around this town called Santa Paula around here, which is like just kind of an old Western town and just honestly has a bunch of funky broken down buildings and railroad stations. And so we finally did that photo shoot. I still need to, we still need to decide on those pictures. They're actually having a prom here in California, outdoors, wear a mask, distance, all of that. So that necessitated going to get a new suit. And just crazy, crazy stuff. Also vaccines. I am completely, fully vaccinated, and I am so thrilled. As soon as we got back from our trip up north for colleges, we had appointments right when it opened up for 50 plus in California. And my husband and I both got the Johnson & Johnson about a week before they discovered the issue or whatever, but totally fine. I'm not sure I would have chosen the one and done, but now I'm actually super glad that that's what we have. I wish my kids could have gotten that one too, but they pulled it, and now it's back, I guess. But all three kids got vaccinated within a day or two of it opening up for kids 16 plus. So they've all had their first. I got to tell you, I feel like a free woman, knowing that I'm vaccinated. Not that, so I had this conversation with my friend who also got the vaccine about the same time as me. And she's like, I don't really feel like things are different. And I think it really makes a difference about how you were behaving before you got the vaccine. So we were very conservative. We were very locked down. I did do some outdoor distancing with friends, but always felt, I was always sort of mentally measuring the distance between us and, it was just sort of, it was there. And now I know that especially a lot of my friends are already vaccinated. And actually we're still meeting outside most of the time. But it's just different, like I just feel so much more comfortable. And, my son just was able to have, he's only got one vaccine, so they did a distance visit last night, but he hasn't really seen his friends in person for a long time. They were all vaccinated, so they just actually stayed outside because he wasn't fully vaccinated. But I don't know. I feel so much more hopeful, and like the tide is turning. We keep getting information that school will be pretty normal in the fall, and just could not be more grateful for that. So psychologically, it doesn't really make sense, but that's the way these things work sometimes. Over the last few weeks, I've also sort of been hit with a kind of a feeling of overwhelm and anxiety and, I don't know, even a slight depression, and have not really been able to figure out why or what's going on. So it's funny. It's on one hand, it feels hopeful. On the other side, it feels crazy. And I think it's just a lot of baggage from this last 14 months and dealing with the lockdown and the disappointments. And then honestly, a bit of guilt for even feeling that way, because we were lucky. We didn't lose our jobs. We didn't lose anybody close to us from COVID, so it's sort of just kind of balancing all of that together. I feel that's starting to lift for me now, but it's been kind of a wild ride. I've been trying to do some journaling, try to work, kind of through that. And I would like to mention, I don't know if I mentioned it on another podcast, but I got this journal in January called the Next Right Thing Journal. I think I talked about it then. So it's a journal from Emily P. Freeman, who has a podcast and I guess a book called The Next Right Thing. And in this journal, she's got a lot of prompts, which is kind of good for me journaling wise. So you can get into it every week and just there's a section called These Are the Days, where you can just kind of jot down just the things that are happening. And then, but a lot of the journaling is really kind of a once a month thing. At the end of the month, she asks a lot of good questions about what's working, what's not working, what are you grateful for, what are you thinking what arrows are pointing to things that you should be doing in the future. And I really kind of like those boundaries. I mean, I also do a lot of morning pages, just, brain dump kind of journaling, which I think helps from an anxiety standpoint. But there's some really thoughtful prompts in the Next Right Thing journal. I'll put a link in the show notes for that, but I've been enjoying that. So, and here's the other thing that has lifted my spirits. Yesterday, we washed all the windows in the house inside and out. For about the last, 5+ years, I've turned it into this thing where the whole family has to wash windows. It takes us only about an hour and a half to do the whole house inside and out. The guys do the outside, Chloe and I do the inside, and it changes things, and there's something about those super clean windows, and I always do it in the spring. I can kind of time it in California where I think it's not going to rain anymore because, rain makes your windows dirty. So, and frankly, I only do this about once a year. I would like to say I did this more than once a year, but honestly, I don't, because I always think, oh, it's going to rain. It's not worth it. And it's funny because my kids think I do this like every couple months. I'm like, seriously, the last time we did this was a year ago. But there is something about the light that comes through clean windows, especially here in spring, that just makes me so, so happy. Before we move on to quilting, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor, the Fat Quarter Shop, for sponsoring the podcast. The Fat Quarter Shop is a one-stop show for quilting fabrics and supplies for quilters around the world. They stock quilt shop quality fabrics, pre-cuts, quilt kits, patterns, notions, and even cross-stitch supplies. As the Fat Quarter Shop Designer Mystery Block of the Month Club approaches its 14th year, they're taking a look back at all the designer mystery quilts over the years and inviting you to join them for a Designer Mystery Quilt Festival. If you've ever made a designer mystery quilt from 2008 until now, they want to see it. From April 29th through April 6th, they're inviting people to join them in sharing a photo of your quilt or quilts to celebrate. Share your quilts on Instagram with the hashtag FQSQuiltFest and hashtag DesignerMysteryBOM. I'll put a link in the show notes to see the quilts as well as those hashtags. All right, let's talk some quilting. In my world, the hand-pieced quilt along that we've been working on is almost over. We are on our last set of big units, and then the next step will just be to sew them all together. So this has been super fun, and I enjoy the community that is built around the hand-pieced quilt along so much. So that's going to be a little sad that it's over, but also, you know what? I'm ready to move on to other projects because I have a hard time while that's going on working on other projects. I've also gotten out of the habit of sewing, of pulling the sewing machine out and really getting a machine-pieced project going, and I've really missed that. I think I mentioned on the last podcast that we've got 3 kids here at home. One's out of college, one is in college, Chloe and Jonah, and they are going to be moving to San Diego, sharing an apartment in June. And so that is going to actually really open up some real space and allow me to have a sewing space again. So there's part of me that's just like, just wait till that happens, because all of my sewing stuff is really tucked away at this point in places that it is not impossible to get to, but it's inconvenient, and it is just that mental hurdle that I'm having a hard time getting over. But whenever I reach out and I talk to people, in the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group, I'm so inspired by what everyone's working on, and I'm just like, I just got to get back to that. I was really in a good thing of every night when we'd come home from our walk, I would really sit down and sew. And now I mostly hand sew, but I'm anxious to get back behind the machine. So I do have the full throw size quilt that I hand pieced for the hand pieced quilt along this year. It's called Harmony. It's still sitting there completely done. And I know it's too big that I'm probably not going to hand quilt it. I still have just a wall size hanging one from last year's hand piece quilt along that I'm still hand quilting. So I just know myself. And Patty, who's my co-host, for this quilt along, she machine quilted hers in a spiral throughout the whole pattern, and it looks fabulous. I don't have a great space to set up quilting right now, so I've been resisting doing that. So I've been thinking about sending it to a long armor, because I do have a great long armor, Deanna Cinzano. She's long armed many quilts that have just got them off of my whip list, like just finished them off. And I used to think that I would never use a long armor, but you know what? Done is better than how you imagined that you were going to do every step, right? And I really kind of enjoy those perfect long arming designs. So I decided, as I was straightening up my space this weekend, and this quilt has been just sitting out, like it was getting dusty. It was been sitting out for so long. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pull out the machine and I'm going to sew together a back. I'm kind of over every stitch of my hand piece quilt along quilts being hand quilted or, done by hand. I did that with the first two, but this one, I'm just going to get over myself because I really like it and I want to use this quilt. Which I don't think I've ever published a picture of the finished one. I've taken on several photo shoots and I've never been happy. So I think I've never really posted a picture, but I will put one in the show notes. I love it. So I think I'm going to send that to the long armor. I made that decision. But I'm actually so I did a throw size quilt for the quilt along, but for the quilt that I sewed during the quilt along, because I like to sew along with everybody, and it actually really helps me, even though I take notes as I'm sewing it the first time about the tips and tricks I want to talk to. I'm very guilty of thinking, I will totally remember to say this little thing when I get to the blog post. I don't need to make notes about it, and then of course that is not true. I forget. So it's nice to be sewing along. So I go, oh yeah, there's this little thing that I like to do here. Anyways, I've decided that what I will do is I'll do the spiral pattern on my sewing machine on my wall hanging size quilt. And I don't know if I'll do that. I think I could probably knock that out in one sitting. And so it would be worth just maybe setting up on the kitchen table to do that. And that will kind of scratch that itch of my, of wanting to do this spiral pattern because it complements the design so well. My other issue with doing the spiral quilting is that my walking foot, is pretty small. In terms of like, if you're just going to use the edge of your walking foot as your guide as you're spiraling around, I think it might even be a 1/4 inch. And what I'd really like it to be is a 1/2 inch. So I need to, this is on my Juki. So I need to kind of figure out how to space that. So those are the things I've been wrestling with quilting wise. I've also been binding a quilt because as I was doing my hand sewing, I didn't want to get too far ahead of the group. So I love to bind a quilt. So that's been nice. And I think every podcast for like the last 6 months, I've been talking about what am I going to make when I start making actual quilts again. And I've thrown up several ideas, but then my new one is a while back, I reviewed a class by Cindy Grisdella on Improv Quilting. So she has a class on the C&T site, and she also has a book. If you buy the class, you get a copy of the ebook. And I went through that whole class, but I didn't actually. And I loved. She's got her method, her process is fabulous. But I didn't actually sew along while I did it, and I really want to do that just as an exercise in improv piecing. So I'm looking forward to that. And I think that just might be a good way to, just get back into machine sewing. Also, in the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group, we've had a bit of a lively discussion about luxury irons and whether or not they are worth the price. And this started with Aliso, who I have. How many? I have 3 Aliso irons. I love them. I have a big one. I have 2 of the minis, which are so handy. Gotta tell you, for the little mini ironing station. One of these days, I need to do this. Is get one of those TV tray. Is that I want to say TV tray, something that you might eat a meal on in front of the television. We used to have them, and people tend to buy those, like you can maybe get one at a thrift store and turn it into a little ironing space and have a little portable ironing station. And I want to make one of those someday because that would be so nice in many areas. What I actually have is just a wool pressing mat next to my machine with a little Elisa, when I'm machine sewing, to do not like a whole quilt, but just units. It's so handy. But anyways, I absolutely love the Elisa irons. They have, you know what they have? Here's a couple of things. I did a review years ago. Really long cords, which is so nice, and they tell you to just put in tap water. So you can do them dry if you want, and I was a dry iron person for a long time, but then I decided I would embrace the steam. The jury's out on that. But my last iron before this, which was also a very nice iron, you need distilled water, and that's a pain. So this one, they just say tap water. So I've been loving those. So they just launched the TG 1600 Pro Plus. So they took the iron that I have and they added several like really nice, little upgrade features. One also thing about the big iron is that it has a 30-minute shut-off, which I love. You can change that if you want. And if you don't like how it pops up, the Aliso irons are the ones you can leave horizontal, which I really like because I knock irons off of the ironing board, and I think it's just a little bit more stable, but that's something you can turn off too if you don't like that. But anyways, they came out with new colors. They keep coming out with these super fun colors. So there's like a yellow and a pink, which they've had for a while, but now they have a blue and a purple. I think they call it orchid. So it's like super pretty colors, which is fun, and some really nice features. And they're all, I'll put a link in the show notes. There is, I think it's until, I can't remember, but there's a pre-sale, a pre-order break on the pricing if you want to get one. But so I was talking about this in the Facebook group, like, what do you think? And it's interesting. There's definitely two sides to that argument. A lot of people who have them love them. Some people thought that they didn't get hot enough, and I'm going to say that's probably an older version of these, because I think these get plenty hot. I have literally burned my fingers a few times on them. But then there's the whole Bonnie Hunter, contingency. She kind of buys a cheap iron and never puts water in it. And I did that for a while too. I had a $15 Black & Decker, but the way it was designed, the edges of it would get caught on things. And then just when I got a nice iron, am I going to say that is it worth 10 times the price for all the niceness of it? I don't know, but there's definitely, like from a gift standpoint, like I would totally, like ask for one of these as a gift, because those little upgrades at a certain point in your life, when the tools that you use are important to you because your hobby is important to you. So anyways, that was kind of a fun discussion of whether or not luxury irons are worth it. I also want to talk about a couple books from C&T Publishing that they sent me and that I think that you guys would enjoy. One is called Design, Make, Quilt, Modern by Heather Black. And Heather Black is a fabulous modern quilter. And I think this book is amazing. So I told you about the Cindy Grisdella book, which is really, it's modern quilting, but it's improv. And I'm not sure I am an improv quilter. I need to do it more to really make that determination. But I think that I love modern quilts, but I think I kind of like ones that have a little bit more, a little less improv in reality. I think that's more my taste. So this is a book that's really less about improv and more just about how to achieve the modern aesthetic. So I kind of wanted to go through a few things with this because I love the way that she has sort of tackled thinking about designing your own quilts. And okay, so the first part is really finding inspiration and being a hunter and gatherer for quilting inspiration, how to store those ideas so that you can use them later. And I love this section. It's called Design What You Know and Love. And it's, and this is kind of, for me, it's like, do I really love improv? I'm not really sure. But she has a list of sewing skills: straight piecing, curved piecing, paper piecing, things like that. Like, stay with what you love and stop trying to force yourself just because you see other people doing various things. You don't have to do it that way. Also, like just stay with what your skills are. She has a little example here, and she has worksheets for like, what do I like, what don't I like, and in this list for her favorite, she loves half square triangles, half rectangle triangles, curves, circles, solids. But what she doesn't like is improv, paper piecing, things like that, which I'm like, polka dots, micro piecing. These are things that she just wants to stay away of, and I think it's just good to acknowledge it to yourself. So she goes on to kind of explain design basics, where you get your inspiration from picking a theme for the quilt. I think that some people kind of make the mistake, especially with improv, that it's like anything goes. But just like, a jazz solo, there is an underlying structure there that's invisible to people who don't know what to look for, but very obvious if you do know what to look for. So she talks about creating balance. She teaches you about the rule of thirds, about using odds versus evens, the S-curve in a design, using a grid or not using a grid, and then a whole section on color theory and playing around with color until you come up with your own personal color palette that pleases you. And then I think this is kind of an interesting addition to a book. She has a whole section on quilting and using the quilting, especially in the negative spaces, to accentuate the design. So there's, how many patterns have you read that it's quilt is desired, and I am one. I think it's pretty known at this point. The quilting part is not always my favorite. I'm still trying to make myself do that, and I will, and I can free motion. Once I get warmed up, I'm not horrible at it, but I feel like I'm a piecer, and I want to stay with the part of the process that gives me the most joy. But that said, she gives you great ideas for how to use quilting in very accessible ways. Some straight line quilting, but not just straight line, from top to bottom, like as part of the piecing and part of the negative spaces, using some pebbling. So just really mixing up the quilting within the quilt to accentuate the design. So anyways, I think this is going to be an invaluable resource, and I am totally loving that. The other one is called One Block Wonder Panel Quilts. And this reminded me of a couple years ago. I bought a pattern from Orange Dot Quilts called Only One. And I guess you can use, as I was looking up like what that pattern was called today, she advertises as you can use like a very large scale print, which are often hard to use as quilters, except for maybe as a quilt back, because it looks so different when you cut things up, but also panel quilts. So I have a Christmas panel that I absolutely love, but I do not know what to do with, and I have been kicking it down the road for like 7 years now. And so last year I bought this because I'm going to do this with this quilt. And what she likes to do is save one panel to put it on the back, so you can, in a way, prove to people what this used to look like. So with One Block Wonder quilts, they stack them and cut them in a certain way and sew them into these kind of hexagon shapes. And that's what this is. This is taking panel quilts, but they're taking this book, which is by Maxine Rosenthal and Nancy Miller, is they actually incorporate the panel into the front and then cut up the rest of the panel to complement it around that center design, because obviously all the colors are going to go together. And so they give you complete instructions for that, as well as a million examples for ways to incorporate the panel and the hexagon blocks into it. So I thought that one was really fun as well. And the last thing I want to mention before we leave the quilting segment here is my friend Minky Kim. We wrote a book together, So Illustrated, years ago at this point. She's gone on to write many books. She's got a fabulous YouTube channel where she posts like 2 tutorials a week, and it's amazing. But she did a collaboration with Michael's, the craft store, and they have her photograph on these big displays in Michael's, and I still need to get over to our Michael's to see one. I know that they have one there because her daughter did a little selfie with it in the background. So if you happen to be in a Michael's, definitely check that out. Let's move on to books. It's been a while since I recorded, so I have a few to talk about. Last podcast, I talked about a book called The Empty Nesters by Carolyn Brown, which I enjoyed. Not, hugely great literature, but just a fun, easy read. And she has a bunch of books on, what's it called? Prime Reading that are free on from Amazon and as a Kindle book. And so I tried another one called The Shop on Main, and I like The Empty Nesters more. This one was about it was in Texas. Maybe all her books are in Texas. I don't really know. But it's about these three cousins that own a lingerie shop. And it's about them and their mothers and how one of them, husband's cheating, and so as sort of revenge, they are all going to get together and beat her husband and his group of friends at this chili cook-off. And it's just like all kinds of crazy stuff. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. I definitely finished it. But so definitely kind of a light romancy kind of book. So not really a huge recommendation, but it was kind of fun. The book I'm reading right now is called The Sewing Machine by Natalie Fergie. And this book went around the quilt groups recently. And I bought, I think that when someone recommended it, you could buy it for like $2.99. So I did, but it's been sitting there for a while. And I am almost done with it, and I am loving it. I am loving it. It really is about a sewing machine and all its owners. It's a Singer. I've been meaning to look it up. 99K. I'm going to stop and look that right now. Okay, I just looked it up, and it looks kind of like it has that featherweight look, but it's hand crank. So we start with a woman who is working for Singer in the sewing machine factory back. Oh, now I'm forgetting the dates. Probably in the 1800s. We follow it through like 4 different owners. At different, times from the 40s and the 50s to the 60s to current day, which is really fun, and all of the storylines are compelling, and it's just really fun and it's told out of order, so it's not like you're following it. You do all of the old stuff, and then we just follow it through time. We bounce back and forth, but one cool thing about it is, at some point. In the it was the first owner of it started a notebook where she wrote down everything she sewed in it and who it was for. So, and most of these people they're making clothing, not quilts. But it was like, blue dress for Clara. And she did some work that was paid, so it would be, it would say paid if it was paid, or collar repair for Ruth, and so they just keep track. And as the sewing machine is getting past, or making its way from owner to owner, people are keeping this up. So the current day owner finds all of these notebooks and then feels compelled to keep it up, and that kind of made me feel like I would like to do that. That would be kind of fun. Do any of you do that? Do you keep a record of what you make? And I think they're in kind of like small notebooks. Back, the earlier ones were handmade notebooks. But I'm thinking about doing that. I think that would be a really fun, and it's just like one line. And then in parentheses, they would put like their initials, so that because of of multiple people were sewing on that machine or something. So anyways, I'm thinking about, I don't know, I say a lot of things I don't ever do, but I really like that idea. As an audiobook, months ago, I talked about a book called The House at Timeford by Natasha Solomon. And I am listening to that on an app called Chirp, where you can buy audiobooks really inexpensively. And I had bought 3, and I haven't really listened to them. So I got back on The House of Timeford. I think I'm about 70% done with that, and I'm really enjoying that. Oh, I want to tell you about something that I discovered, and that is if you use Chrome as your browser, there is a Chrome extension called Library. And when you install it, when you go to Amazon and look up a book, so you install the library extension, and then you configure it by adding the libraries that are near you that you would want to go to. And so then whenever you look a book up on Amazon, this little thing comes up in the same window as the Amazon window for the library extension, and it starts looking for it at your libraries. I will say it takes kind of a long time to populate, but it has saved me from buying books a few times. So that has been really cool. So I highly recommend that extension. And then the last book that I read is called The Paper Solution by Lisa Woodruff. And I have talked many times about the Sunday basket, which I use every week and has really helped me get more done in less time from a household management standpoint. So I do it on Saturdays, but every Saturday morning I sit down with my Sunday basket and there's definitely a sort of, a method to how you go through it. And I can link a Sunday Basket podcast. She does a ton of podcasts. So the Sunday Basket comes from a company called Organize 365, which I really love her approach to things. I wasn't sure I was going to love the Sunday Basket because it's a lot about batching. The idea with it is that every time, like during the week that things come up, paperwork to file or something that you need to order from Amazon or permission slip to sign, or I don't know, just a chore that you need to do, an organizing project that you're thinking of, a book you want to read, any of that stuff, you ask yourself, can this wait till Sunday? And if it can, you just jot it on. She uses index cards. I just have scratch paper that I've cut up into eighths, and you just jot it down and throw it in the Sunday basket. And then at one point on Sunday or Saturday, if you're me, you sit down, you dump it all out, and you categorize it. She's got certain categories of things to do, things you can do in front of the calendar. If you're familiar with the getting things done way of doing things, it's like that. It's batching. These are things that are errands. This is everything to do with like money, things like that. So you categorize it, and then you just sit down and you power through it. And because you are doing like things at the same time, it takes less time than if you are constantly task switching during the week. And so I wasn't really sure I believed this because I was kind of one that would stop what I was doing and go order that thing from Amazon. But it's kind of turned me into a believer. I get through, life is a little simpler for me these days. But I kind of get through it in about an hour, and I never think about those kinds of tasks during the week. I just am tossing them in my Sunday basket. So anyways, she wrote a book called The Paper Solution, and she talks about how to kind of get out from the mountain of paper. Now, I think I'm fairly digital, but there was still a lot of stuff that I learned from this. One thing is she doesn't believe in filing cabinets. She believes in binders, and I kind of like this idea. So she advocates for having a household reference binder, household organization binder, medical binder, and a financial binder. And as we have just recently, in the last 6 months or so, had a living trust done, like really kind of taking care of some financial stuff. We have consolidated all these different retirement accounts that we've accumulated from different business, working for different companies. So we've kind of done a lot of that kind of financial work. But what we really need to do is update this the files, that in case something happens to us, our kids will know, frankly, where all the money is. That's always a fear when, my husband and I have like gone away together. Like, what would happen? Like, would they even know, because we've got multiple bank accounts, things like that. Would they know where the life insurance policy was? So before a big trip a few years ago, we put that all together in one place and have just said, this is where this is, but it really needs to be updated. And I love the idea of, instead of putting it in a filing cabinet, which is where it is now, you create a binder for it. And it's a very finite thing, and you can just put it on the shelf right next to the living trust and say, if anything happens to us, everything you need to know is right here. And same thing with the home reference binder is really about, if you sold your house, this is everything that people would need to know. So it's where you can keep track of the repairs that you've made, the appliances that you have, the paint colors, that you've used, things like that. And the idea of keeping them in the binders is that it's very finite. It kind of forces you to go through it if they get full, where filing cabinets can just kind of get away from you. Same thing with it's your one place to put warranties and instructions and things like that. So anyways, the whole book is about that. And what it prompted me to do is to make binders for my 2 kids who are going to be moving out, for my 2 older kids. And she has a podcast episode, the Organized 360 podcast. It's number 382, and I will put it in the show notes, where she talks about, she's got kids similar ages as mine, where she makes these binders to send with them. And I know that for my kids, we've got this issue of when they get certain pieces of paper, they don't know what to do with them because they don't really have filing cabinets. When they get their W-2, when they get information on, the insurance for their phone, or like the EOBs for, going to the doctor that you're gonna, because my daughter, she's, even though she's living at home, she's responsible for her own bills now. And, it's that time where you got to explain where you need to check the EOB against what the doctor's really charging you. But they don't have places for this to live, so they're just they're sitting around everywhere. So I've created binders. I didn't bring them up with me, but that have these sections for your house. So as they go out and get an apartment, it has a place for their rental agreement to live. Stuff for anything to do with money, anything to do with their stuff as they start to buy. Right there, I've got their stuff for their phones in there. But as you start to buy furniture or things like that, it's just places for information like that to live. And I totally got the idea from that podcast. And I think for them, as you are young and you move around, just having one binder that has all that information is their medical information. If something happens to them, my kids don't have anything in particular to put in there. For people who, like if you were diabetic or something like that, it's something that somebody else could even pick up and help them out with. So anyways, that's been kind of fun. Wow, this podcast is getting away from me a bit here. I guess I had a bit of a buildup of things to talk about. So let's move on to TV. Acorn is showing a new series. It's not actually a new series, but they're promoting it, which is how I found it, called The Brokenwood Mysteries. And it's like a Midsummer Murders, but in New Zealand. So if you have Acorn, I am really enjoying that show. And the other movie that we watched as a family, which was fun, is Judy. Again, I'm never the first person on these things, so it's been around for a while. It's about Judy Garland. Renee Zellweger plays her, and it's really about her as an older adult. There are flashbacks to when she's younger, and man, can I just say that, we knew how it was going to end, right? But I feel really bad about her childhood and how the movie studios basically turned her into a drug addict. And if you want to know more, watch that. But what was completely amazing is the makeup, how they did up Renee Zellweger to look like her. Especially I kept noticing, Renee Zellweger has kind of small, squinty eyes, and when she smiles, they get really squinty. And Judy Garland has really big eyes, right? But when they did close-ups, you could kind of see the makeup that they were doing to make her eyes look bigger. Not that that was bad or anything, but I'm just like, yeah, that's how they're achieving that. But she had some, prosthetics done, so that she could look like that. And the songs that she sings in that movie, she is singing. She was absolutely fabulous as Judy Garland. I really enjoyed that. I think I'm going to have to save some of the rest of the things I had planned for another podcast, but I did want to talk about a couple things. When I was going through a little bit of my funk a few weeks ago, one of the things I was having just an absolute tantrum about was meal planning. I was just like absolutely sick of everything that we ate, but did not feel inspired in any way to go find anything new. And I appealed to you wonderful listeners in the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group, and people came through for me. Thank you so much. So I have bookmarked that post, and you should go check it out. I will link to it. But I have already, and I printed out a bunch of recipes. I have already made two of them. One of them is the Ultimate Beef Stew by Aina Gardner. Susan, I believe, is the one that shared that, and it was So good. So I already had a beef stew recipe, probably Betty Crocker. So, solid, but nothing special. And this beef stew recipe, which calls for like short ribs, but I had just normal stew meat, and I had exactly the right amount, 3 pounds in the freezer, and thinking I need to use this before the weather gets too warm. But it just has some elevated ingredients, including cognac or brandy. I used brandy and red wine. So that just the actual the liquid of this was so rich and delicious. As a matter of fact, my son said that it reminded him of, he loves French dip sandwiches, and it reminded him of like a really rich au jus. And just had some different vegetables, and it had fennel, and it was very good. So I will put a link to, I will put a link to the post in the Facebook group. And the other one was a chicken with orzo recipe that my daughter made. She cooks once a week on Sundays. She's cooking today, yay. And that was delicious as well. And one of the ones that I'm looking forward to, and I think I'll have her make because she loves pad thai. There was a pad thai recipe. So maybe that'll be next week. What I've been thinking about is, my 2 older kids are going to be moving out in June, and then my youngest son will be moving out in September. The UC system starts really late, so it probably won't be till mid to late September. But I'm kind of wondering, I keep thinking as I'm cooking, the way I've cooked since quarantine is different because I've not had, my 2 boys, they're older and they're tall and they're big and they eat a lot of food, more than they did when they were in high school. And so I just double everything. I just make ridiculous quantities of everything just so that we might have a little bit something left over for leftovers. But so I won't be cooking in that quantity, but I am kind of just thinking like, how much can I cook how much less can I cook? is what I'm thinking. Like, I'm really hoping I can cook like 3 or 4 times a week, and then just have a rotation of leftovers going on. Because we won't have all these kids, I think I can really pivot away from some of the starches and carbs, because I am trying to keep things, I'm not keto, I'm not super low carb, but I try to just stick with good carbs. I try to stay away from white flour and sugar, things like that. So it'd be nice to just kind of think about, what are meals going to look like, and are they going to look different, and how life is going to be a little bit simpler. I'll be sad when they all go, don't get me wrong, but also whenever I go through, and I'm sure you can understand this, when I do my menu plan, I'm thinking, oh, that looks good. Oh no, that person's not going to like that. Every meal is a balance of who's going to be unhappy, and I totally make somebody unhappy for almost every meal, but that's just the way it is. If you don't like it, you can go make your own dinner, but it'll be nice. I think my husband and I have less things that we don't like, so that'll be, it'll be kind of fun, and hopefully there will be some cooking mojo coming back my way then. I've got a few other things that I was going to talk about, but this podcast is getting plenty long, so I think I'm going to save that for next time. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank some people who left reviews. That's one thing if you don't do a podcast for a month and a bunch of reviews show up, which is really nice. And thank you to everybody who reached out to me to just say that you missed the podcast and that you hoped everything was okay. I really appreciate that. So I would like to thank Gloria's Goodness, Marion Bowden, Linda at Home, and 1234 Bubbles. I love that, for your very sweet reviews. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that this just feels like you've got a friend on a walk with you or in the sewing room with you to chat with. That is exactly what I want for this podcast. And once again, let's keep the conversation going with you popping over to the Simple Handmade Everyday Facebook group. I'll put a link in the show notes, and feel free to post what you're working on, what you're reading, what you're doing. We're just a bunch of like-minded people in there. We're just friends that are just doing life together. As always, you can find me online at my blog, Simple Handmade Everyday, and on Instagram at Kristen Esser. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You have a wonderful week.